We'll have a short introduction by Marjella, CEO and co-founder of Datamaran, and then jump into our wonderful panel. If you want to tweet or use social media, hashtag materiality is the hashtag of the day. Please get active and share your thoughts over the course of this panel. Marjella.
Great, thank you, Ian. And I will keep my speech short because I just realized the team didn't expect me to speak. So I'll keep more time for the panelists. But I do want to say a couple of things. And first and foremost, a big thank you to AMRO for hosting us today and for bringing everyone together in this amazing place. Very inspiring building. And bringing me back home to Amsterdam on a sunny day. So that's fantastic. But wanted to start with a personal story. So this year, in February, I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Incredible experience. But then something happened. As first-time parents, we realized that our little boy was ill. And it took the doctors about 5 weeks to figure out what was wrong. He had to have a surgery. After the surgery, everything was fine, everything was cleared up. But it made me realize a few things. One, I felt more convinced than ever that I chose the right profession, being part of this movement that is creating more responsible business, responsible markets. But also I realized that if something happens that really hits you in the stomach, that really hits you in the gut, you can make things happen really fast. You can become an expert really fast. You can assemble the right kind of people around you that can give you the right advice really fast. And as a community, you can accelerate change fast. So that brings me back to the topic of the day, materiality. What is really material? If things are truly material, we have to act. I think from being in the sustainability space for the longest time, almost 15 years, I almost don't dare to admit it, but 15 years, my issue with the profession has been that it was so incredibly siloed. You know, companies doing materiality analysis in a sustainability reporting team, and it being disconnected from strategy, it sometimes not even being seen by CEOs or boards. And that inspired me really to create Datamaran and say, okay, if we want to really integrate non-financial risks into core strategy and core business, we have to somehow adapt our ways. We have to change the message because what we're doing is just not working. It's not moving fast enough. So we started Datamaran 5 years ago. I found two unusual suspects, as I call them, my two co-founders, former Wall Street trader, converted now, and also an AI big data professional. And we said, can we somehow come up with a system that analyzes these external risk landscapes in a way that appeals to decision makers outside of the sustainability team, arming sustainability professionals with the credible data that they need, because we have to make a case and we have to make it faster. So using technology as a way to basically come up with a more objective landscape that can bring those people at the table that are typically not at the table. Now, I think, fast forward 5 years later, I feel like we are in an entirely different landscape. Things are moving super fast. And yes, there are the Greta Thunbergs that are kind of pounding the horn, but simultaneously I see that the level of integration of ESG, and we'll hear this from the panelists, is really happening fast across the board. Herman will share with us the investor perspective. Tjeerd will talk about the corporate and the banking perspective. We'll hear from Marieke about the service provider perspective and the risk perspective. From Elena about the government perspective. So there's all sorts of entities out there that I say form part of our community that are driving this forward, and no longer is it about sustainability on the side, but it's about true integration. One example I just wanted to pinpoint, because I think for me it's been a success story, is the task force for climate-related financial disclosures. And the way that was framed, I think helped catapult the whole movement forward, because it focused in on the single issue, climate, and we can all see it happening around us. It's that issue that hits you in the gut. I read I read yesterday in the FT that now the air pollution in the London tube system is 10 times above the acceptable level, according to the WHO. So back to the TCFD. We see it happening all around us. It is framed in a way that brings in the finance function. It's framed in a way that talks about mainstream business processes, risk management, financial metrics. And I think as a community that care about these issues, we need to think about how do we best frame the discussion, how can we use data to accelerate it, and how do we work together as a community to keep on battling uphill, because let's be honest, it is a battle uphill, but now more than ever with the community, we are making massive progress. So I'd like to hand over to Ian and start the panel, but I'd like to thank all of you for making the trip here. I personally believe that the train has left the station and we are picking up massive speed. I'm incredibly pleased to be here with many of our Datamaran clients and larger community, and I hope we'll have a very fun and constructive and inspiring day together.
Wonderful, thank you very much, Marjella. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be unpacking some of the concepts that Marjella just highlighted, and there are three in particular that I'd like us to sort of pull out as we have this discussion. The first is the translation of non-financial risk into terms that executives understand and that boards can manage. So really that financial component, what does that mean and why is that so important in order to further promote this information? The second is around the governance structures. What do we expect there to be in place? How can we break down some of these silos that Marjella was talking about and connect the dots between sustainability, risk management, and finance? And then finally, it all boils down to a company's understanding of their non-financial risks, right? Materiality analysis. So what does that look like and what's the evolution that we've seen? So I'm joined today by a group of expert panelists. We have Elena Arveras, Policy Officer for DG FISMA at the European Commission, Herman Mulder, Chair of the Impact Economy Foundation, among many other titles I think we could have selected from. Tjeerd, Global Head of Business Advisory Reporting and Engagement from ABN AMRO. Marieke from the Putte, Director of Risk Advisory for EY, and obviously Marjella. So, Elena, I'd like to first focus in on this materiality piece. Recently, the European Commission introduced this new idea of impact to materiality. Can you just give us a bit of a flavor? What did it look like before? What does this new change bring about? And what are your expectations from that?
Well, thank you for the welcome words. First of all, to give a bit of context and where I'm coming from, we have to remember that the Non-Financial Reporting Directive that you are familiarized with most probably has only been applicable for a couple of years, but it was drafted quite a long time ago. As Marieke was saying, in the last 5 years, it has been a lot of movement in the field, Paris Agreement, TCAP, GRI, SASB standards even. So back then, it's curious that the proposal put on the table by the Commission didn't refer to impacts in sustainability reporting, but it was an amendment by the Parliament that introduced this reference. So we're very happy they did that, because back then it wasn't something that was in the minds of everyone. And thanks to that, we have now this double materiality perspective that we call it to make it simpler, and it's made a difference. As I say, a lot of things have happened in between. A lot of people are talking about impacts nowadays. Thankfully, I think a lot of people are also understanding the links between these impacts and the performance of the company, because at the end of the day, maybe the difference between this information that is financially material and this information on impacts is not that different, or maybe some of it in the long run might end up affecting the value of companies. So we see that there's been a change in the way companies think and in the way users think, also very important. And this has been also accompanied by other developments in the regulatory framework. For instance, last year, the Sustainable Finance Action Plan already covered 3 legislative proposals that were put forward in May on a taxonomy of environmentally or sustainable activities, benchmarks regulation, and also regulation for investors or certain financial market participants undertaking investment activities. And this will also make a difference because these guys are going to be required themselves to disclose information about adverse impacts concretely, also about financial risk and so on, but also about adverse impacts. So the whole community, the different industries are putting an eye right now on these issues, and this is kind of elevating the profile of sustainability overall. To add also, there was a requirement in this non-financial reporting directive that gave a role to the board, to the supervisory board of companies, and the fact that they are now involved in the whole process of reporting, it's a step forward in integrating different departments of the company to make more people internally talk about these issues and realizing of their importance and their link with the strategies and the business models in current days. So I think there's been a change, and I also think that we could do more to make it clearer. But indeed, we can see a massive change in the past 5, 3, even the last 3 years since it was applicable. So yeah.
Great. So we have policy as an intervention, trying to get companies to think differently. Herman, now the investor perspective, another major driver for companies to really be more transparent, to enact better processes and put in these sound governance systems. So the investment community, what is the type and the granularity of information that they're looking for to understand more the process information? So we have the performance KPIs, but what a company is actually doing behind its doors, and then how it's managing that.
As you can see, I'm a happy pensioner, and I'm also a happy grandfather. So I share the ambition which Marjella has as a young parent. So I'm the beneficiary of a pension fund. So I want to ensure that my pension fund, as a long-term investor, makes sure that I will enjoy my pension in a society which I consider to be acceptable. And I would like all of you to have the same. So in this respect, I think it's important to recognize that particularly pension funds, but also insurance companies, pension funds have to have an investment belief which serves the interest of the future pensioners, which is by definition long-term value creation. On this specific question, I think the world in which we live in right now, that is technology, that is transparency, has become increasingly complex and complicated. We have multi-capitals, we have multi-stakeholders, we have value chains, we have negative impacts, and we have positive impacts. All of those make it very complicated for anyone, whether you're an investee or an investor, to understand what are the future facts, what are the future expectations, how do I become not only more resilient against issues which threaten my very existence as an investor, but also how can I help myself and my investees, exercising my engagement, my leverage, for them to do better business, which is future-proof. That's very complex. So, in answering your question, I think it's extremely important that you start with the investment belief and your purpose, which must be inclusive, and that you then start to engage with your staff to understand why are we doing this? What is material to us in serving the purpose which we have with our stakeholders, which includes society at large. So it's very complicated, and it must be very much internalized, not just mechanical or technical. You have to make sure that it is something an investor must be in together with its stakeholders. And I think that comes back to the second question, which we'll discuss in a moment. It has governance consequences, but it also has consequences for your preparedness to open your doors for the stakeholders to come into your kitchen and understand why you're doing, making the investments which you do.
Thank you. So, we heard about inclusivity, having investment belief. Now, Tjeerd, at AMRO, you also have a belief, and I think you framed it as integrated thinking. So, can you tell us a bit what does integrated thinking mean? And on that journey towards integrated thinking, what were some of the hurdles that you had to overcome?
Sure. So, integrated thinking is that when making important decisions or when steering a company or an organization, is that you take all stakeholders and all material or value creating topics into account. Financial, pre-financial, not yet financial, intangibles, and all stakeholder interests. In order to do that, you need to know who your stakeholders are and what's important to them. So what's value creating to them. And in order to internalize that into an organization, you need to set up a process and governance and structure to support that decision making. So at the end of the day, integrated thinking is a tool to improve decision making. And if you improve decision making for board members, they will be able to steer on long-term value much better, because then they know where to steer and what the levers are that they can turn. The second part of your question, what are the hurdles? Well, I think we have 45 minutes, right? So the hurdles are a lot. There are a lot of hurdles. But I truly believe that board members or senior management of any company is actually being paid to think integratedly. He or she just doesn't have the tools to do it. So, but he or she is actually, it's their job to steer a company towards long-term value, whether you're in the board or supervisory board or whatever function you have. That is the part that you play. And I think sustainability, reporting, finance, group economics, risk, all these departments can help their board members to do that. And that's the essence, I think, of integrated thinking, leading towards long-term value. And the hurdles, there are a lot, but if you dig through them, then the essence is there. So the essence of any company, any organization with the desire to create long-term value for their stakeholders will have a need of integrated thinking.
Great, thank you. And I think part of being able to formulate that integrated thinking is also having a common vocabulary. And now I want to bring in Marieke. You're kind of the sustainability outsider here. And we talk about non-financial risks and sustainability risks, and I think you just call them external risks. So, how are executives that you're working to advise at UI, how are they responding to this idea of having to manage their external risks, and what's really promoting this idea for you?
Yeah, I think I'm advising on companies to be in control. And I think when you define in control, it should be broader than it's preventive risk, it's external risk, but also the strategic ones. And I see that, I don't know if it lasts a couple of years, but I see that the sustainability risks are becoming sort of more normal risks, sort of be integrated. So I have a lot of discussion with clients where they say, why do I need to have materiality risks, and also the risk paragraph to explain what are the risks of my company. So you see a lot of movement in sort of integrating that. On the other hand, I see that if you are focusing on external risk and knowing exactly what's going on, there's quite limited resources that you have. I always use the World Economic Forum. They have a yearly report that you can define by country to sort of as input for the risk assessment or what they need to disclose. but you really would like to have more information, more during the year. That's why we were focusing, of course, also on internal risk, preventive risk, and to see how you can have your house in order. But also, how can you have reliable information during the year of how your external risks are doing, and how do you structure that? And that's quite difficult, because if you Google around, you can find everything, but is it reliable? Is it really something you should do? And even further, you would also want to have an alert and an answer to it. Because if you're sort of having all kinds of alerts and no one is doing something about it, you're obviously not in control. So what you see, coming to your question, what are the companies working on, is really a sort of online, continuously monitoring of your risks. So to make sure that you can act in time, and not only have the information but also react. And that's where the artificial intelligence comes in, because then you can sort of define how to react.
But this is where risk and materiality come together, right?
Yeah.
Because when I'm looking at this process of defining the biggest risks, it's often, from my view, it's a few people sitting around the table looking at the World Economic Forum template and saying, okay, what are our biggest risks?
Yeah.
But if you look at a really thorough materiality process, that's involving all stakeholders, internal, external, that's continuous dialogue, that's much more thorough. And if you then look at the most material topics for a company, then probably if they screw up on those topics, it's probably their biggest risks. So we involved the risk teams in the materiality assessment, and they said, wow.
That's quite logical, right? In the end. To have them combined.
But it is now. But it's not common practice, I think, yet, because a lot of the times materiality is being done by sustainability people.
Yeah.
Right? So they say, okay, let's have the matrix because GRI asks it.
Yeah, and I think it's moving more towards together, not only by us as EY, but also especially at the clients.
Yeah.
Because it's why do I do it 2 times? Why is the process different?
Yeah. And you mentioned continuous monitoring, artificial intelligence. Marjella, shifting back to you. Now, Datamaran's vision is to help business and society function better through scalable technology solutions. How do you see technology being an enabler for some of these more robust business processes that we're talking about?
Yeah, so in multiple ways. I think what we're seeing as a company is that, through technology, you have an opportunity to build systems, to build software. And that software and those systems can be owned by companies. So in my view, this is how you can help move sustainability from a project into a process. But also I think, as to Marieke's point, how do you figure out what those external risks are, those non-financial risks are? It's moving. And although it's been very clear that climate change is a material topic for many companies for the past 15 years, the circumstances as to why they are more relevant now than ever change in terms of regulatory developments, in terms of your reputation, and in terms of your stakeholders. So that's also an opportunity for technology to be able to scan what's happening in all these external landscapes, to structure the data in a way that it also makes sense for risk professionals to say, you know what, we can trust this data. And it's not just a simple questionnaire that was done in a limited stakeholder group, but there's really solid information out there, and we're now able to parse it in a way that makes sense. An additional challenge for the sustainability professional has been that a lot of these topics are very qualitative. So I think we've been really focused on getting the right KPI data. And I think that makes sense. When you look at TCFD, you do want to understand, okay, what does this risk mean from financial terms? But also in terms when you think about trend spotting and understanding, okay, what is coming up, where's the undercurrent? There's a lot that can be done through technology in terms of picking up these qualitative topics before they even become KPIs. So the systems aspect, the structuring aspect, the monitoring aspect, all elements that technology can contribute to. And the road is long. I mean, I think for us, we've started off with thinking, how can we best capture materiality through technology in a business process? Now it's about, okay, we're hearing from our clients, our IR team needs regular updates. Okay, so what does that look like? Let's build it together. A client recently during Climate Week said, can you help us build an executive dashboard? Our executives want to hear more about how these issues evolve, but also there's the education piece. This is typically not part of their mandate. But I need to bring data, a lot of data, but it needs to be very simple. So there's lots of challenges there around use cases and about things people want but don't really exist yet. And that's where I really hope we can continue to play a big role.
Fantastic. So, you talk about emerging issues. Climate change is obviously one of the big ones that I don't think is emerging any longer. And if we talk about the financial realities and non-financial risk, in the framing of climate change, then obviously the first thing that jumps to mind is the TCAP, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, which you also mentioned earlier. And I just want to talk for a second about that sort of more the model than the nitty-gritty detail. And Herman, maybe I can start with you. What do you think is new or different about the TCFD recommendations, and why do you think this is such salient information for the investment community to leverage?
First of all, it is industry generated. I think that's an important development. If anything else done by regulators or supervisors, it typically doesn't land effectively in the organization or in the sector. The same is true with the HLEG, with the European Action Plan as a follow-up. But the inspiration was given by the sector itself. So this inclusive approach, I think, is extremely important for the sector itself to take ownership of the issues. The issue with the TCFD is, if I put it in a broader context, is the TCFD is an extremely important initiative and tool for the financial sector to take care of climate and climate disclosure. However, there is more than climate. And I think we have to really recognize that, and there is more than negative or potential negative impacts. There is biodiversity, there is human rights, there is not only negative impacts of negative risk, there are also positive opportunities. And I think we have to go beyond the TCFD. It's a very good initiative, and I hope that the industry is going to embrace it and adopt it. But we have to look further, because climate is just one of the issues we have to address.
Absolutely. There's a whole non-financial radar and these emerging risks that keep popping up. Now, Tjeerd, as a company that has already adopted integrated thinking, integrated reporting, marrying the financial with the non-financial, what have the TCFD recommendations brought to you? What's changed since their introduction for a company that's already been talking about this for many years?
Well, I think the big upside on that for us is that it brings other people to the table from within the organization. So it gets other people involved. I would improve a little on the wording. So I don't like the C in TCFD, because then the automatic response within the company is that, oh, that's for sustainability people. When sustainability people already know that it's not for sustainability people, it's for risk, finance, board, it's for everybody. But once they start reading it, and that takes a while, but once they start reading it, then they know this. So we have the TCFD task force within the bank is run by risk, by central risk. And it involves sustainability people, it involves strategy people, group economics, finance, business. So that's what TCFD is bringing us, and I think that's really helpful. And we are embracing it as being a helpful movement, pushing the company to think about what are the possible scenarios 1.5, 2, 3, 4, whatever degree scenarios.
Hopefully not that high.
Well, I think we are on 3.8 at the moment, right? That is the current, so if you're talking about these scenarios, then you should include 3.8 at least. And but if this was driven by sustainability people, then we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today with the TCAP. Because so this is actually, with regards to your question, this is pushing integrated thinking to a new level and integrating other parts of the business as well, which is a big positive.
Super. I'll make sure that write Mike about the C as well. Mike Bloomberg will get that fixed for you.
Yeah.
Marieke, so climate change, obviously, an existential crisis, but there are lots of other issues that companies need to stay attuned to. When you're talking to executives, what are some of these other non-financial issues that are keeping them up at night?
So if you look at sort of the developments along the years, I've been with risk almost, I think more than 20 years now. Started as in a contractor, so I started at the BAM, very operational, very environmental, safety. Then I thought there should be a broad approach to risk, so I joined Arthur Andersen and I completely went the other financial side. So I'm quite happy that now, 20 years later, there's more drive to more integrated thinking in what the risks are. Because if you sort to refer back to climate change again, I do have conversations at the moment. They're really investigating what there's a company, cannot name, but they're close to the sea. They're everywhere because that's their business. They really are investigating at the moment the business effect. Where do they should move, or more inwards, or what the risk is for their business. It's not from climate change, from a very sense of sustainability. It's really about their business and being able to continue to operate. And so, of course, I can name a lot of other risks that companies are facing, like cybersecurity is very hot topic at the moment. So I see it in a way that you're looking at the environment to see what's out there, what other companies already found out. Because sometimes I have clients who say, "Oh, no, cyber is not a very issue to me." Say, but why is every other company in your environment reporting about it? So it's also, I think, our role as an advisor to sort of look around and making sure that the picture is complete.
Great. Thank you.
That
that was spot on. So we're a bit tight on time here, so I'm gonna just shift into some practical takeaways that we can give to the audience and those tuned in today. So Elena, what's some practical advice that you can give to the audience, especially for those dealing with trying to understand your regulation, or how to make these non-financial issues more visible?
Well, I would say it's very important to put on those both lenses, not only to cover the risks that are financially material for your company, although that would be a very useful starting point. And of course, given that the TCAP is out there, and as Herman said, it was developed by the industry, and it covers a lot of disclosures that regard processes. So it's interesting from that point of view because it's more about what's the company doing about it and how is the company tackling certain issues, rather than what is exactly this or that. So even the integration of climate risk in the regular risk management of the company, that's also very interesting. And you could extrapolate this to all the other sustainability issues. So I would say keep also the lens of am I having also an impact on the environment or on society that I might not see as financially material today, but it might become financially material tomorrow. I would suggest that's kept in mind as well. I wanted to mention there is a corporate laboratory that's hosted in Vlugt, And the first project they're working on is climate-related disclosures. So they're focusing on scenario analysis and on the TCAP recommendations. And they will issue their report in December, which includes some best practices on all climate-related reporting, but still you can get a flavor even of the front runners in sustainability reporting, because I believe that also going to companies in your same sectors that are a bit more advanced might be helpful to you to get some kind of inspiration. And the Financial Reporting Council also issued last week, I think it was, a report on climate-related disclosures as well, that was developed by a laboratory that they also established. So these kind of inspirational documents can be very helpful to if you're starting or if you don't know exactly which way to go. Of course, you have the frameworks, and not only TCAP, but also the GRI or SASB, which is also sectoral-based, so it's very useful. But you want to know what you're looking for, because some of them are only focused on financial disclosures, which is very important and a very good starting point. And some, like the GRI, have more focus on the impact side of environmental and societal impacts. So have a look at those. In any case, what anyone can see is that any regulatory development in the area will be based on what's out there. So nothing new will be developed out of the blue. It will be based on current industry practices and current standards and on current equity, basically. So it's always good that you are familiarized with the current practices.
Thank you, Elena. Now, Herman, I know you're involved in a few impact-oriented organizations that are doing some really relevant work, and I was wondering if you wanted to just share a bit with the audience about what you're doing, what they're doing.
Well, first of all, I coming back to my first observation at our conversation was defining my purpose and my investment belief, which should be broadly supported by not only by the board but by the whole organization. I think that's an internal issue which is quite important. This means that you have to ask yourself as an investor, am I an active owner looking for a financial return, or do I add another dimension to it? Am I an inclusive steward for a world where there is not just resilience against negative developments, but also clearly looking at, say, the positive opportunities which that same market offers? When I'm discussing this with Tjeerd, I sometimes say this: in the banking sector, you have three lines of defense. The first line of defense, which is business development, risk ownership. The second line of defense is risk management. The third line of defense is audit.
I thought the third line was me.
Why is Tjeerd not the first line of offense? Because the line of defense, and that's a cultural issue, because it's a very defensive attitude, which financial investors and banks in particular, also by regulations, are looking at resilience, ESG, and not looking at the other side of the story, because a lot of climate is adaptation. Let's be realistic about that. So there are opportunities here. So as an investor, that's my second point, and also that's part of my work with Impact Institute and the Impact Economy Foundation, we have to identify the opportunities which a volatile, risky world offers to us, which is our own adaptation as investors and investees. Disclosure is driving the change, so we have to become much better, and I can only say a lot of compliments to ABN AMRO Bank, what they did in the 2018 impact statements. I really hope they're going to continue that, and Tjeerd was very much a driver of that, but it was supported by the board and the CFO, and I think that's the key one. Peter Bakker sometimes says we need, the auditors will change, will save the world. Well, let's start with the CFOs. And I think that's very important, and when I'm, as an investor, looking at my investees, I'm looking at the materiality matrix, not just the outcome, but also how it came about. And I'm also looking at the icons of the SDGs. Where do I stand for? And I'm also then engaged myself with that company and say, listen, how do you put it into practice? And are you also looking at the other SDGs? And are you also looking at how you bring your staff with you? On the comment of Marieke, she was mentioning the in control statement. If you're looking at impact as what you do in the context of stakeholders and society at large, you can never be in control. You're a partner in that. So I'm a firm proponent that companies, boards are going to issue a duly considered statement, which means that the auditor is going to say, this company has duly considered the key stakeholders and the material issues. And that's an explicit statement which a board can give. How do you get that? I think we have to upgrade the stakeholder council, formalize the materiality matrix process, create a stakeholder council as part of the corporate governance, which is composed of external stakeholders advising the board under the responsibility of the supervisory board to make sure that there is an independent view what the company does right and possibly wrong in its value chain. Because the butcher should not be the one to test his own meat. And I shouldn't say it in a carbon world where we are not eating meat anymore, but we have to have, as I said before, we have to bring the stakeholders, not just at the window of what we do as a company, but bring them into the kitchen and start discussing what is material. And that's one of the things which we're doing with impact economy also. It's governance, but it's also monetization of positive and negative impacts. And including the positive impacts you have in society, which will long-term benefit your value creation mission.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, Tjeerd, what's the advice that you would give to audience members just starting on this journey of integrated thinking or towards integrated thinking?
Go. So let's get going. Work together, learn from each other, collaborate. I think there's a lot of people in the room that we work with at AMRO. There's a lot of great examples from other companies out there that you can learn from. People, this is not a competitive field. This is the fun about this area of being in business, that people in integrated thinking space, in sustainability and TCT space are eager to share their practices and learn from each other. So that's what makes it fun. And I would not hesitate, so that's why I started with, I would not hesitate, but just get going. Start the journey. If you haven't done so already, continue the journey. And get board involvement as soon as you can. So I completely agree with Herman saying CFOs, CEOs, they need to be involved. And because it matters to them, not because we are lazy or don't have the mandate, but it matters to them. So if you get their involvement, that's, and chief risk as well. So the full board, get them on this journey with you. And then it helps to use the right wording, right? So keep postpone using the word sustainability as long as you can. And materiality, don't use that either. So use other words.
Which word would you say?
Value, long-term value. And biggest risks. So what are the biggest risks to the company? And how did you assess them? And who did you involve? And how are you managing that?
And the opportunities.
And not forget that. Yeah. But you get them at the table by the discussion on the biggest risks, and then after that you start to talk about it.
No, you start with the opportunities.
Okay.
That's how business is driven.
Scare the
opportunities.
Scare their pants off. All right. So now we have time for a few questions from the audience. If any brave soul wants to stand up, and if you could just project, so we can. Anybody tuning in can also hear.
As maybe me, I would start with a joke that a big opportunity not size at the end is a risk. So it's really a question about also the taxonomy and the vocabulary. I'm from Generali. I'm in the sustainability department.
Massimo.
Yeah, exactly. Together, he is in the CFO area. We are in another department, but we are strictly working together with risk colleagues. And I have to say that there is a very good collaboration also for renewing our materiality exercise and also for giving them input for the risk assessment process. And I see that there is still a bit of, not I would say confusion, but overlapping terminologies, maybe more for the colleague from EY. We mentioned sustainability risk, ESG risk, we speak about emerging risk, we speak about strategic risk, reputational risk. At the end, are all of them the same things? It's simply a matter of integrative thinking, or is it more about the time horizon, which could be a differentiator factor, or is more related to be quantifiable or not? Because at the end we have the impression to do in different ways in different departments the same things sometimes.
Yeah. So to answer that, what we use is a very simple one. It's not even an EY one. What Kaplan is using that. Strategic risks, external risks, and preventive risks. So I would say if you use that kind of thinking, it's really across the whole organization. It doesn't matter if that's within sustainability or cybersecurity or whatever risk you are identifying. And the reason I use that often is because it's the simplified version makes sure that you can really talk about it. And I say external risks, but it's really, coming back to what Tjeerd was saying, it's really also upside. Knowing exactly what's going on and how externally, and how to make sure that you're ready to deal with it or take the opportunity to make money out of it. And coming back to emerging risks, these are something you should monitor, but not on a daily basis, obviously. I think that's a separate, in what I do, it's a separate category. Because you really need to have someone, especially what we see normally at a strategy department, who is looking further than the next couple of years. Looking at trends, consumer trends, and that's something also can have risks, and that's why you separate it from the normal methodology.
Herman, did you want to jump on?
Yeah, I really jump in. I used to be a risk manager in my previous life before my retirement in the same bank Tjeerd was working on. And I was selected to be head of group risk at the time because I came from the business before. Because the reality is, not doing the business doesn't generate any income. Neither can you be a steward for improvement in society. You have to make your income. And that's why I keep telling myself, and I hope you agree with me, that we have to get out of the corner of looking at risk as something which is related to not doing the wrong things. ESG is good, but it has now with the SDGs another dimension. And if you want to see what the potential is of the SDGs, with the ESG or the ES as bottom line, obviously the guidelines, UN guiding principles in name. If you look at the potential, look at the Better Business, Better World report, which is a global evaluation, what the business potential is of implementing the SDGs, you will see there is a lot of opportunity here. So let's make it, and that's how business is driven. Not by not doing the business, but by driving the right business. And I think that's the spirit which should be in your investment belief as investor, but also as investee, say, well, I want the shareholders I deserve, the investors I deserve, because I am not only future-proof, I'm also looking for future opportunities in a structured, strategic way without doing harm under the ES standards.
Please, maybe right to this point, I think it's very helpful to have all the investors in our necks because they're driving this topic a lot, I think. But they're all looking from a risk perspective. If I look at the ESG reports from MSCI, from Sustainalytics, whatever is out there, it's always from a risk perspective from my impression. So obviously something has to change on the investor side as well to really push that towards the companies, because it's all about risk. When we talk about opportunity, then we might as well use the term sustainability and materiality to link it to what you said, because people will start listening to that. It's my opinion.
I have a little case study on this, a different perspective. So when we started the business 5 years ago, we had to raise some money because technology is expensive. So we said, okay, we need to do a financing round. Where do we go? After doing a couple of financing rounds, we realized we had no impact investors. We only had mainstream investors. And I thought, okay, let's make this our little game. Let's always get mainstream investments into our business that is actually quite mission oriented. So I think also companies that have a mission to improve the world can look at it differently and look for, the mainstream investor. Because if you are able to convince the mainstream investor, it means that they actually believe that what you're doing can be a business and is an opportunity. A lot of people think that Datamaran is funded by impact investing. It is not.
We can do one last question. Yeah,
Pressure
spotlight.
No, I was wondering, using maybe the wrong words, but working on the materiality assessment and also including sort of risk-related aspects into it, like take a specific time frame, use likelihood, use location to make it more tangible and more like risk and not only sustainability oriented. Also, stakeholder engagement is obviously important, and there are many examples, I think, like either do a survey or a roundtable, or maybe even introduce a council. Tjeerd, you also touched upon stakeholder engagement and the governance and processes related to it. Can you touch a little bit upon those processes, how you do this?
Sure. So there's no one way of doing it, I think, but we've done various. And for instance, on the let's use the example of human rights. Right? There's a lot of there's guidance on human rights, and for the financial sector and for other sectors as well. We all will agree, probably, at least in this room, that it is a material topic, or it's value creating, or if you screw up, it's value destroying. Right? So it's either a risk or an opportunity, but it's probably both. But it's also a very complex and broad issue. So by inviting stakeholders into a room like this, and having the debate, having open conversations, open dialogue with experts, we had a meeting here a few weeks ago with stakeholders that were negatively impacted somewhere down our value chain in their human rights, and inviting them and having the dialogue with them. Then you get more of a grasp around the topic. So in-depth dialogue, so it's materiality assessment and all those processes, I think they are quite mature at the moment, so we know how to tackle that. But having in-depth dialogue and with experts and relevant stakeholders, I think that's really helpful to get a better grasp of what you need to do to address it.
Thank you. And on that note, go, go, go. So please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. I invite all of our Datamaran users to get some coffee and tea, and we'll reconvene in about 15 minutes. And for everybody else, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you next time.